Keeping a promise I made years ago. Coming up on Weekend at the Cottage. Welcome to Weekend at the Cottage. I'm Nick Manoilovich. Today, finally, keeping a promise I made to myself years ago. It's about apple pie. My mom was an expert apple pie maker, and this one time she served this apple pie where she had worked cheddar cheese in the crust, and I still remember the flavor of that pie to this day. All these years I've been wanting to replicate it, and I'm pretty sure I finally nailed it. Mom's apple pie with cheddar cheese crust. Out of this world. Wait until you try this. Now, making this pie, we're gonna go through 4 key steps. First, we're gonna make that cheddar cheese crust. Number 2, I'm gonna do a salty sweet caramel sauce. Number 3, we're gonna talk about the apples and get them ready. And then number 4, we're gonna pull this whole thing together. Are you ready for a step-by-step tutorial on how to make this exceptionally delicious pie? Let's get started. First thing we need to do, and for me this was kind of the tough part, was to replicate that cheddar cheese pie crust. I'm taking a liquid measure. It has half a cup of cold water. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of white vinegar, then crack an egg in there, and we're gonna take a fork and whisk those ingredients together. Make sure that yolk and the egg whites are completely blended. This liquid needs to be really cold. We're adding 2 ice cubes, and now you can just set that to the side. We're taking a medium-sized bowl, 2½ cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. I'd like you to add 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, stir those ingredients together. It is a butter crust after all, so I'm taking 2 sticks of butter. I cut the sticks of butter into tablespoons and then add those into the flour mixture. Toss them about a little bit to coat. Our hands are washed. Our hands go in, and now we're gonna rub the butter and flour together, and you're gonna do this for a couple of minutes until you're left with kind of pea-sized shaped clumps of this flour and dough mixture in your bowl. We're now going to that iced liquid, tablespoon measure, sprinkle in 4 tablespoons of that liquid. Have a fork handy. I want you to stir that together a little bit. Now this pie crust is gonna get very cheesy. I have 1 cup of grated cheddar cheese. I'm gonna sprinkle a tiny bit and then stir it in. We wanna kind of coat the cheddar with that flour mixture, so add a little bit more, stir a little bit more until all of the cheese is added. We're back to that iced liquid. We're gonna do 3 tablespoons. Hands go into the bowl, and you're gonna start to pull your dough together. If it seems too dry, add a 4th tablespoon of the liquid. Your dough should come together without any problem. Don't overwork it, right? Just make sure the dough comes together. Turn the dough out onto your work surface, divide it into 2 equal-sized discs, wrap them separate, and then we're gonna place them into the fridge. During the testing of this recipe, we always made the dough the day before, so not a bad idea. Give your dough at least 8 hours to chill completely before you start the recipe. Dough is done. You wanna make that salty, sweet caramel kind of sauce? That's up next. To make the sauce, we're heading to stovetop. I have a small saucepan, medium-high heat. It all begins with butter. 4 tablespoons of butter in that saucepan. As soon as the butter melts, I'm gonna add a 1/4 cup of cornstarch. Stir that in until the butter and cornstarch are completely blended. Next up, sugar. Brown sugar, which is gonna give this sauce some lovely caramel notes. We're gonna sprinkle in 3/4 cup of brown sugar, let it melt into the pan. Then sweet meets salt. I'm adding 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and then a little bit of spice, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. Stir those ingredients together. That saucepan contains the building blocks of a great sauce, but that sauce needs liquid. I'm adding 3/4 cup of apple cider. We're pouring the cider in, and doesn't look like very much is happening at all. Yet, if you just keep stirring, let that cider come to temperature, your sauce eventually will thicken. It is so fantastic. It almost ribbons off of the spatula that you're using. Once it's nice and thick, we're taking it off of the heat, bring it to your work surface. Last thing, we're adding the juice from half a lemon. It's gonna brighten the flavor of this sauce. Stir it in, the sauce is still nice and thick. Last thing I like to do is to take a piece of wrap and just place it onto the surface. This will prevent a film from forming. Set your sauce to the side. Time now to work on the apples. Selecting the right apples for this pie is important, and I selected a favorite. These are Cortland apples, kind of a typical Macintosh style apple. They're tart, they're sweet, they're very crisp, but most important, when you peel and slice them, they don't readily brown, so they're perfect for an apple pie recipe, and they performed really well during the testing of this recipe too. We're taking our Cortland apples, we're washing them, taking a peeler, take away all of the skin, and then we're cutting the flesh away from the core. This is really important for the success of this apple pie. The apple pieces need to be sliced evenly and thinly. So just take your time and slice those apples thinly and evenly. One neat thing about this recipe is I did the apples by weight, and you're gonna need 2 pounds of apples to make a perfect pie. Apples are done in that bowl. Now we're bringing our sauce back in, and I'm just gonna drizzle a little bit of that sauce on the apples, 2 spoons, and then I'm gently tossing the apples in that sauce. The goal is to have each little apple slightly coated with this sauce. So add a little bit more. It looks so fantastic. It tastes pretty good too. And then with the spoons, we're gonna toss gently. And you just keep adding that sauce and tossing until your apples are completely coated. When they are, we're ready to assemble our pie. Assembling this pie is super straightforward. One tip, always take your dough out of the fridge about an hour beforehand. We're gonna start then by sprinkling a little bit of flour onto our work surface, onto our rolling pin, then unwrap the first disc of dough, little sprinkle of flour, flip it, little sprinkle of flour. Then we're rolling our cheesy pie dough into a round. I'm using a 9-inch pie plate, so I'm gonna roll this out to about an 11 or 12-inch circle. Then I'm gonna roll it up onto the pin, stick the plate underneath, and then unroll it into the pie plate. You wanna just make sure the dough is forming right to the bottom of that pie plate. Now we're taking a sharp knife. I'm going to trim away all of the excess dough from the edge of the pie plate. Now we're going to add our apples. And this is really an important step in the recipe. We're taking our spoons. We're not just going to pour it or plop it in. We're taking our spoons and carefully transferring over those apple slices. And you need to make sure they're lying flat in the pie plate. Often when you're doing an apple pie, you get this like pie filling, and then there's like a void, right? You get this dome of pie crust. That's not gonna happen with this pie. This is all pie that's coming your way. We're gonna layer those apples in nice and slowly until they're perfectly flat. One final hit of spice, freshly grated nutmeg. Set your pie plate to the side, and now we're gonna roll that second piece of pie dough out. Same thing, 12-inch size, roll it back up, and then we're gonna unroll it over the top of the pie. We're gonna make this pie look perfect, so I'm trimming away the excess dough, and then I'm just kind of going along with my fingers and pressing those 2 pieces of dough together before I go back a second time, 2 fingers and thumb to do that classic crimp all the way around the edge of our apple pie. Last couple of things before we go to bake our pie. I'm taking a small bowl, cracking in an egg, a little bit of milk, whisk them together, and then using a pastry brush, I'm gonna brush the top of the pie. We need to cut vents in the pie so steam can escape. So I'm cutting a couple of slits, and then I go back with chevrons. You could do X's and O's, hearts, whatever you'd like. Our oven is preheated to 400 degrees, rack is in the middle position. Always place your pie on a foil-lined baking sheet. There may be a little bit of oozing and spill over. We're then transferring our pie to the oven, and you're gonna bake for 30 minutes. At that 30-minute mark, we're gonna rotate our pie, and then we're gonna bake for an additional 25 minutes to 30 minutes. It'll take about an hour for this pie to be perfectly prepared. We're gonna bring it out of the oven when it has that classic golden dome. It looks so fantastic. It smells amazing. You'll see the cheese is kind of melty on the top. And now you have to wait for it. I'm really sorry, but you gotta give the pie maybe 2 or 3 hours to set. We waited for 3 hours for this to set perfectly before we took a sharp knife, and you're cutting wedges. When you lift the pie, right, you can see those layers of apple, plus that top is perfectly flush with the surface of the pie. Serving it onto dessert plates looks amazing. You absolutely gotta serve this pie with vanilla ice cream. If you wanna serve it with our homemade vanilla ice cream, all the better. One really interesting thing happened when we did this recipe. After taking a couple of wedges of the pie out, we noticed a little bit of weepy liquor right in the bottom of that pie plate, some of that caramel sauce. So wait for it. Take a spoon and scoop it up, and then just pour that over the vanilla ice cream right before you serve. Now, I'm ready to tell you all about the flavor, but before I do, we have a lot of other flavorful things you can enjoy. Head to weekend@thecottage.com, subscribe to our website when you're visiting, look for us on our dedicated YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us there as well. And then finally, when you make this pie, I really hope you make this pie, take a picture of it and post it using hashtag weekend@thecottage on your favorite socials like Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So Nick, what's the final verdict? Well, I can tell you, I have tried a piece before this, but the crust is very cheesy and flaky. The apples are crazy flavorful, and the little sauce and vanilla ice cream all over the top is magical. It's all quite magical. Enjoy Mom's apple pie with cheddar cheese crust. Until next time. My God, what a pie. Best pie I ever made, I swear. Okay, on record, that's it. Best pie right here Nick ever made.